Chapter 5. Why is it called Queen Josephine? I heard my young and clear voice asking. Do you know Josephine? Napoleon's beautiful and lonely Queen Josephine. After leaving Napoleon, Josephine bought Malmaison Castle in southern France, where the rose-loving queen hired experts to build a magnificent rose garden, collect and cultivate a large number of rose varieties. During the Anglo-French War, Josephine arranged a special passport for a London gardener to regularly bring new British rose varieties to France across the national war line. Out of respect for the Queen's hobby, the Anglo-French fleet even stopped naval battles to allow the fleet carrying roses to pass. This rose is named in memory of Queen Josephine. I don't want to be Josephine. She won the roses all over the world but lost the hearts of her lover. It's too desolate. Young me raised my head and smiled. Stupid girl. How can you be Josephine? You are a rose of heaven. Ah, Ruth, little Ruth. Looking at the blooming flowers, I suddenly felt sad. A rose is a rose. But this rose, like all roses, only bloomed for one morning. I don't know how long I squatted. Suddenly, someone patted me. I was shocked and suddenly stood up. My movements were too fast, and my eyes were dark. The other party was also shocked by me, and helped me. Only when I was sure that it turned out to be Grandma Lu of the elderly from Tai Chi team. Little girl, what are you doing? You came so early today. Why don't you come to practice? Grandma Lu's has always treated me kindly. Hearing her warm words, my nose was sore, but I still smiled. Grandma, I'm looking at flowers. Oh, is it a new one? This rose is really good. Maybe someone else sent it to old Joe again. Hearing it, I can't help but inquire all the way. It turned out that old Joe was the flower gardener of this park. He was lonely and loved flowers, so he simply moved into the garden, and became gardener in the competent area. He rarely appeared during the day. He usually trimmed flowers and trees in the morning and fertilized the soil at night. Because the flowers are well raised, they are quite famous far and near, and someone will also ask him for advice to help regulate their own plants. Old Joe doesn't want to be paid. He only asks others to give flowers and plants as a reward, not for fame, but all varieties that are not available in the park. Old Joe has very few friends, but it seems that he has met a person who is a little speculative recently. That person often brings some flowers and trees to old Joe. Recently, the park is full of flowers and strange flowers. It seems to be a gift from that person. Finally, Grandma Lu shook my arm and said softly, "Little girl, don't look at the flowers and plants every time you come here. You should exercise. You look too thin and it doesn't look good." Looking at the old woman's kind smile, I suddenly remembered that my grandma was the same. She liked to shake my arm before talking. I couldn't help bent down and hugging the old woman gently and nodded obediently. I see. Thank you, Grandma. When I go back to my house, I can't work at ease. Who will give flowers to old Joe? The world is so big, there are so many people, and coincidences. But Queen Josephine, there is no such rose in the ordinary florist garden. Who else will go to France to find it? They has worked so hard to get it, and why gives it so casually? Like a trapped beast, I wandered back and forth in the room to ask who old Joe was. Several times my hand touched the doorknob, but it seemed to touch the soldering iron and quickly withdrew. I finally went out after 10 p.m. Although the night at the end of April is already a warm spring season, it is still very cool when the cloudy day at midnight. But I just felt irritable. I randomly wore an old cotton shirt and sneakers and went downstairs. When I came out of the door, I suddenly saw the mirror on the wall. Inside, my face was whiter than usual, my cheeks were abnormally red, my eyes were bright, and I didn't even dare to look at them. I took a deep breath and went out. Although it's late at night, there are still many people in the park who look basically lovers. I should be careful when walking. When passing through the densely leafy dark, intimate whispers often come out. After wandering around for a long time, I finally found a row of 3 small houses in the depth of a shrub at the north gate of the park, which should be the residence and cultivation of the gardener. The lights in the first room on the left were on, and there were sound inside. I hesitated for a moment and knocked forward on the half-covered door. "Here you are. I'm waiting for you." As an old voice sounded happily, the door opened, and a gray-haired old man appeared, probably old Joe. My arrival was obviously unexpected. The old man's smile disappeared. He skeptically called me and asked in a rather stiff tone, "Who are you and what's the matter?" I'm a little tongue-tied. "Yes, what am I doing here? We are totally stranger? What do I want to know? What if the answer is yes or no? If you have nothing to do, please go. I'm waiting for someone." The old man waved impatiently. "Who are you waiting for?" I didn't even think about it, and asked. The old man looked at me strangely and turned around and wanted to close the door. "I'm sorry, I'm too reckless. You are Mr. Joe. It's a bless from you that I can see so many beautiful flowers and plants here." I rushed to the door, and today's Frankfurt rose is an expensive variety. Old Joe was stunned and his face was slightly glorious. "The little girl still has a little vision. Do you want to ask me about growing flowers? Come in." I was relieved and entered the room with a grateful smile. The ground was in a mess, full of cultivated flowers, nutrients, earth shovels and scissors. Speaking of the new varieties of flowers and plants in the past month, it almost like several treasures. Nonsense, taking a lots of photos and check so many information. I have simply prepared and did my homework. Old Joe was happy and probably felt that I was a child, and his tone gradually became kind. I gradually understood varieties plant recently were originally given by one person, and I don't know where he got them. It seemed that he had no time to take care of them and felt sorry for the flowers and plants, so he simply brought the flower to the old Joe, who planned the park. It happened that old Joe loved flowers like his life, and the two had a good talk happily after several times. "He's a nice young man," old Joe said for sure. "Young man." I was slightly disappointed. "Is it very young? How old is it?" "Why?" Old Joe looked at me with some surprise. "Of course, it should be older than you, about 27 or 28 years old." "What, little girl, are you looking for someone? Just now you asked me where the plants come from and who that person is." "Oh, that gentleman's surname is, it's a strange surname, right? Do you know him?" Old Joe's voice faded away, and a huge roar came from my ear. "It's not him, it's not him, it's not him." "Little girl, what's wrong with you? Are you not feeling well? Hey, hey." I came to my senses and smiled at old Joe. I consciously smiled very desolately. "I'm fine. Sorry to bother you. My name is Xiaobai. I'll ask Mr. Joe about your gardening skills another day." I bowed, opened the door and walked out. "Just call me Joe." "Are you leaving?" "It's nearly the time for that person to come. He promised to bring me flowers today. Don't you want to wait for him?" I turned around and smiled. "No, I'm not looking for him. I just like those flowers very much." With old Joe inexplicable eyes, I walked out of the bushes. The sky began to rain, 1 drop, 2 drops, and the cold rain hurt the skin. I didn't feel it all. I lowered my head and walked slowly. I didn't notice that someone was coming in a hurry in front of me. That person bumped my shoulder hard. I almost fell. A powerful hand held my arm and wrist in time. "Sorry, miss, are you all right?" "Oh, it's okay, thank you." I broke free gently and continued to move forward. The other party stepped back, let me go and walk into the bushes. After a few steps, my mind moved. I subconsciously looked back. The light was dim, and I only saw a tall shadow disappear into a tree. No. How could it be? Although the voice just now sounded so gentle and pleasant, it was not him. He is not that tall. If it were him, how could we just meet and not know each other? Lou, as long as you are 50 meters in my radius, I will notice it immediately. Ha ha, a lot of forgotten words will suddenly be remembered when people are caught off guard. The rain was getting heavier, the couple dispersed one by one, and the voices of laughter faded away. I looked around blankly and lost the ability to think. In a trance, I found myself standing in front of Queen Josephine. The wind and rain are drier, and no matter how noble the roses are, they are also tired, the petals are messy, and the branches and leaves are oblique. I squatted slowly and stretched out my hand to hold the branch. Don't worry, Queen Josephine has no thorns. My fingers slowly slipped down, and suddenly there was a stinging pain. I looked down. It turned out to be a broken side branch, and the sharp end was deeply embedded in the end of my finger. Ha ha, I raised my head and smiled silently. Roses without thorns can also hurt people, and roses full of thorns will also hurt. The rain flowed down my cheek and into the mouth, bitter and astringent. The world in front of me was blurred, as if it were trapped in quicksand, and my body and mind gradually collapsed. End of chapter 5.